Hi, everyone, and welcome to this next edition of the Sustainable Connections podcast. If you have been a listener in the past, you kind of know the format that we are trying through ERM and our networks to find people who are doing the kinds of partnerships and collaboration that are helping to solve the great planetary challenges of our time. Today's guests certainly fit into that category. We not only have the planet covered, we're kind of going beyond. So I'm really excited to be joined today by Amy Rosenthal of Planet, as well as one of my ERM colleagues, Mike Mangiante. And we're going to talk about what Planet is and does. We're going to talk about how ERM works with Planet as a partner and get into some of the kind of amazing use cases around the technologies and the work that both Amy and Mike do. Amy, I want to welcome you into the conversation first and say thanks for joining us today. We're so excited about this and excited as well that ERM and Planet have the partnership that they do. So if you can introduce yourself, tell us what your role is, but also tell us a little bit about this kind of amazing organization.
Mark, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. ERM is one of my favorite partners and companies. It's amazing how you guys focus on the environment and the sustainability solutions we need. I'm Amy Rosenthal, and I'm the Senior Global Director for Conservation Initiatives at Planet. And that means that is also what I focus on. Planet is this incredible company that was established based on this animating idea that you can't fix what you can't see. Back in 2010, a few NASA engineers really believed that we can use space to help life on Earth. And they've been building these satellites with NASA. They're bigger than a bus. They can take $1 billion to put into low Earth orbit, and they can take a decade to get there. As a result, they believed strongly that if we want to help solve the world's most pressing challenges, we had to have eyes on the world at the pace and the scale that changes are occurring. So they took a chance and they developed what we now call CubeSats or nanosats. These are shoebox-sized satellites that go up into low Earth orbit. And once they get into that orbit, they actually line scan the planet, taking a high resolution image of just about every place on the planet every day. In addition to that, there are complementary tasking satellites. They take an even higher resolution image of the place you want at the time that you want it. And with that, we can really see how Earth's surface is changing on a daily basis and in ways that help us to really understand what the problems are, where they're occurring, and insights on how to solve them. Of course, we rely on partners like ERM to go from that data to insights and indicators for solving those important problems.
We're going to get into that from data to insight, part of the discussion for sure. But I'd love to tease you out a little bit more, Amy. First, how many satellites are now up there?
We currently have about 200 satellites in orbit. 180 of them line scan the planet, as I described, and then almost 24 of them take those high resolution images. I'm really excited that in the future, those are going to be complemented by additional constellations, ones that increase the resolution from 50 centimeter pixels to 30 centimeter. We call that Pelican. We have a tech demo up now. And a second one called Tanager. And yes, we do name every fleet after birds. And
Awesome.
Tanager, a resplendent, gorgeously covered bird in the Americas, it is what we call hyperspectral imaging. We have multispectral, like 8 bands of different colors reflected that are up there in those imaging machines now. But in the future, that'll go to 400 bands, taking us beyond the visible light spectrum, as well as much narrower gradations than our 3 cones in our eyes can see. I think about it as seeing the world through the eyes of a butterfly.
So not only can we see the planet in real time based on the line scanning, zoom in on it where we want, we can see it in a whole bunch more gradations of color and intensity than we could hope to otherwise. All kind of amazing. I assume there is an internal debate at Planet about whether calling them fleets as opposed to flocks, giving the bird naming is appropriate. We'll probably set the debate aside for now, but listeners might want to let us know their views. Mike, I want to bring you into the conversation. And ERM does a whole bunch of things. We work across the full spectrum of sustainability, the environmental, the social, and the economic. But I bet a lot of folks listening don't know we have the kind of data scientists like you who are using the kind of data that Planet presents. So both, Mike, how did you end up in your role? What is that role? And can you describe the Planet partnership from your side? How does this work?
And really great to talk with you all and talking with Amy about our partnership today. So a bit of background about me. I am a partner here in our Washington, D.C. office, and I lead our global climate risk and resiliency practice at ERM. And essentially what that means is I have a large team of economists, of climate scientists, of geospatial and remote sensing experts who work with our clients to help understand how their businesses face risk from climate change now and into the future and what they can do to manage those risks. But in addition to that role, I also work very closely with a number of our corporate partners. I personally lead our partnership with Planet Labs. And so it's been really a great partnership with Amy, with others at Planet, where we've been able to leverage Planet's imagery to help us understand what are some of the risks that clients face, be able to actually visually identify them, and be able to plan so they can best develop programs and projects that reduce the impacts that they have on natural environments and ecosystems and things like that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how we actually partner with companies like Planet. For that, I want to take a quick step back and kind of talk about why do we partner with companies, right? What we're seeing is that many large companies are really taking ambitious steps to meeting their climate goals or actually creating sustainable operations across their businesses. And in order to really meet those goals, these organizations need to bring together a variety of different expertise, from digital expertise to increased data to advisory services to tie it all together. And we see that there's no real one business that's able to actually accomplish that. And that's why we as ERM partner with multiple different organizations, one of whom being Planet, right? Where we actually bring together Planet's best in class data that Amy was just talking to alongside our advisory services to help our clients meet some of those goals, or at least understand them and be able to set their strategies in a better way. And so Planet's actually a really unique partner of ours where we've been working with Planet since about 2019. And over that time period, we've actually been doing a lot of work in this impact assessment space. And that essentially means we've been working with our clients to help them understand how to design projects or how to operate projects or actually close down large capital projects in a more sustainable way that minimizes impacts on nature, it minimizes impacts on societies. And we've been leveraging Planet's imagery to be able to really be able to visually identify some of these sensitive receptors, right? We're thinking of things like wetlands, thinking of things like protected areas, so that when we're in construction or when we're planning sites, we can best minimize the impacts that our clients have on those locations. So as part of that, we work very hand in hand with other experts across our business, including biologists, including social experts, to help evaluate that information. We bring together other information like survey data from the field, like company-specific data, to be able to further evaluate and again, minimize those impacts or maximize the sustainability of our clients' operations throughout their life cycle.
So starting to get the picture from both of you, and I guess love to dig in and maybe go from the broad picture about numbers of satellites, frequency of scanning, producing a lot of data, down to a couple of anecdotes that bring this to life for folks. And Amy, again, you mentioned your conservation focus. Maybe there's an anecdote there of how you've worked with folks to apply Planet data that you think really brings this to life. And Mike, if we could get to a project level and kind of speak to the specifics of the impacts that we're trying to help people avoid or minimize and how this really works in practice, I think that would help everybody who's listening to us today. Amy, can you go first?
This is a great question and an important one. I was brought on to really understand how we can drive biodiversity considerations into our products, our strategies, our partnerships, like our one with ERM, as well as thinking about pre-commercial and philanthropic ways we can advance biodiversity conservation. Planet is both a publicly traded company with a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders and also a PBC, or a public benefit corporation. We have a purpose and North Star aligned mission driven areas of investment because we think they're important. That includes climate risk and resilience. It includes biodiversity and conservation, humanitarian assistance, and crisis response, as well as food security. I have looked at all the ways Planet products get applied to these kinds of use cases. And I can say that they really range from addressing environmental crimes to finding your interface with nature, your dependencies and your impacts as a company, to your nature positive pathways, restoration, forest regeneration, as well as environmental impact assessments, sensitive areas, and stewardship management of natural resources, parks, reserves, indigenous territories, and others. That is a small subset, actually, of all the ways that you can use this kind of data and imagery when it's at your fingertips. But one of my favorite examples is from the nonprofit Just Dig It. We work with them in East Africa, where they partner with communities and use a really low-tech solution to climate risk and desertification. They dig these crescent moon-shaped ditches called bunds. And once you dig them, over time, a miracle occurs. What it does is it lowers the land surface temperature. It increases the soil water content in the top layer of soil. And you start to see native vegetation regrowing. And as you see this occur, you can actually watch it in our daily imagery, greening up over time, but you can track it quantitatively too in our planetary variables or derivative analytics. Land surface temperature, soil water content, crop biomass. And in the end, you can see that communities are on the front lines of addressing these areas of climate risk and building resiliency. Resiliency that is complemented by new products like microinsurance that helps to improve livelihoods and outcomes over time. This is the kind of work and opportunity we have with ERM that provides these distinctive advisory services around sustainability questions and climate risk in particular.
Okay, Amy, two things, because I'm fascinated, and the two things are actually unrelated. One's a follow-up and one goes back to one of the other things you said. But if we have these communities who are digging the crescent-shaped holes, I'm kind of guessing this is a traditional practice, and they've probably been doing it from long before we had satellites. And so they could just keep doing it. But now they're doing it, and they're doing it in partnership with you. And is it that Planet provides the proof of concept? They were digging these and having these impacts before, but now you're able to show the total benefit and make a case for there to be more practices like this? Or where does it go? How do the puzzle pieces of the partnership connect?
That's exactly right. The communities are making their own solutions to the problems that they are confronted with. They do it in partnership with Just Dig It. But Just Dig It gets fundraising from philanthropy, from bilateral and multilateral institutions, and they need to demonstrate success on the ground, not just in a single site with one community, but across many sites. And satellite imagery and data have this benefit of being interoperable and scalable, being able to tell you where it's happening, how much it's working, and to do that over every site that you have on the face of Earth.
Awesome. And then the unrelated, but touches back to something else you said. You mentioned environmental crime. And I know that a big part of the competition for sustainable connections are the true crime podcasts that are proliferating out there. But I wanted to get an example of it. All joking aside, I'm picturing like you can see illegal mining sites. And then even if that's true, who do you tell? Like where does Planet go with information about environmental crime to get something done about it?
So you could turn this into a true crime podcast, sustainability style. And I'd love to have some of these examples that I think are so powerful highlighted. One is from the Brazilian government itself with their Programa Mais, where they have a platform that they work with that is powered by Planet data. And they find areas of environmental crimes, illegal deforestation, illegal logging, illegal gold mining, etc. And they use that to design enforcement strategies to respond to them. This is a country-wide program. And so this includes research from those at universities, state agencies, and others who are all part of this integrated response. Civil society also gets involved. There's a great example of Amazon conservation and an indigenous federation in southeastern Peru, where they identify areas they want to monitor. They find cases of illegal gold mining and invasions of indigenous territory, and they make denunciation to the state government, and they identify it clearly in satellite imagery. And that way they partner with government to solve the problems that they're confronted with.
Amazing. And the fact that you're line scanning the whole planet every day means this is happening in actually real time, and that hopefully these issues, these environmental crimes, can be stopped before they progress too far and before the damage is too great. Mike, I want to pull you in as well, like looking for that anecdote, that story that maybe for you was a bit of an aha as you got into the ERM Planet partnership, that showed you the power of this. I know one thing you said to me in the past that struck me was that the Planet partnership lets ERM change the way we look at projects and challenges, kind of literally and figuratively. So how does that come to life? What's it look like in practice?
No, and I think you're exactly right there. This partnership has really been a game changer in a number of different ways. And Planet has some of the highest frequency and lowest cost imagery that's available on the market. And that's been a really important aspect for how we're actually monitoring active construction projects for our clients, right? I'll give you one good example. And this was actually kind of early in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the things we were finding is that there was a lot of course, limited business travel. However, capital project development was still moving forward. And so our clients had limited ability to actually go to the site, have boots on the ground, and actually keep track of just progress of the construction, make sure that nothing was really going wrong. In order to help them kind of maintain that business continuity, we worked really closely with Planet to use their near real-time high resolution satellite imagery to capture regular images across large capital projects so our clients could watch or essentially monitor construction progress as it was happening and look for other things, right? We're looking for things like stormwater implementation. We're looking for things like potential encroachment into some protected areas, into cultural sites. And so the use of Planet imagery was really allowed us to maintain that continuity and oversight across that time. Now, what we found is that going forward, this is actually going to become a really valuable tool for our clients, even after they've been able to go back to the sites. We're able to identify things that they wouldn't be able to see just even standing boots on the ground at the individual location. And one of the critical elements that we found is we're really providing essentially is a visual ledger, right? How can clients both identify problems that are happening in near real time to be able to go out and respond to that in person at the specific site location, but also have a ledger that they can provide to regulators to showcase what has happened across the project site. And then another piece that we've been doing is helping them think through after a project has been completed, looking through potential encroachments and being able to set strategies for how they can adjust activities in the future for the following project so that we reduce potential impacts and we really increase efficiency across project implementation.
And Mike, where's there been particular success? So a type of impact that's been reduced, the kind of encroachment that you see us now consistently able to avoid. How does that benefit the client? How does it maybe benefit the surrounding community and the surrounding ecosystem?
No, good question. And I think one of the impacts that we've typically been seeing is mainly just encroachment into things like wetlands, into cultural sites where you may not know they're there, they've been mapped out, but they haven't been appropriately flagged. And so contractors are just quickly moving from one site to the next to move materials to kind of continue in the construction process. And unbeknownst to them, they may go through a potential protected area, right? What we've been working with clients is saying there may be better ways to actually flag those sites, or at least be aware of what's happening on the site so that you can include it within your project plans. You can establish right-of-ways that are outside of the boundaries of the protected areas, which is typical practice, but essentially just making sure that that is kind of included within how contractors usually operate at a site level.
Okay. And Amy, maybe coming back to you, I mean, part of what I hear listening to Mike is that as great as this Planet data is, and you talked about the resolution moving now from 50 centimeters to 30 centimeters, it's mind-blowing, literally. It still sounds like it must be combined with an on-the-ground point of view. So it's almost like a blended perspective is the most powerful thing. And is that what you see from the Planet side as well? And does that, again, play out in some of the conservation or other work that you're doing, bringing together that highest level from the satellites themselves, but still combining it literally with data that's gathered on the ground by people walking around, by people who live there?
Data is powerful when it informs actions and behaviors. So what we're always looking to do is to put those data into the hands of folks who are on the ground, who are making the decisions about Earth and its natural capital and biodiversity. And so the ways that we do that is to combine data sets very often, some that are field and ground-based, emerging conservation technologies like eDNA, environmental DNA, and DNA barcoding, with satellite imagery, and with those long-term knowledge building uses. I come from museums, and so I know about biological specimens and cultural artifacts and what makes a species, and you really do need those data. We always will, but we can make them more interoperable. Also, we can extrapolate from them, we can interpolate, and we can forecast using AI-powered models, process-based models, and others on the derivative analytics, using data from many different sources together and running on planet imagery. That making sure that the information we have is as updated as possible and at the resolution that helps us to really understand the problem and make the right decisions. That's what Planet aims to do. That's why we've gone from a satellite company to a data company and now to a platform company, to help ERM, its partners and clients, to make these decisions and to make them in a way that bends the curve from nature and biodiversity loss to a nature positive pathway that restores and improves outcomes for environment, for economy, and for health and welfare for people.
Yeah. And Amy, does Planet do any part of the community and social engagement, or is that always with a partner? And I guess the follow on, I'll give it to you in advance, is then how do you in any way maybe vet those partners to make sure everything they do with the data is good? Because we've already confirmed you can see everything. And it wouldn't be hard to imagine some of the data being used in ways that were less savory instead of more. So both those things. Yeah. Does Planet get it engaged at the community level, or is that always a partner role? And do you have conditions for partners about giving them access to this in order to engage communities and see everything they can see?
I'm glad you asked the question about ethics and how these data can be used. I want to clarify first, we're talking about 50 centimeter or 30 centimeter pixels at the most. We're not reading anybody's license plate anywhere. I don't know what you ate for breakfast. That said, we can see your house. And so there are considerations around rights and privacy and ethics. And for that reason, Planet has a strong ethics review process. Customers go through due diligence, and we certainly have strong considerations about who accesses these data and how and when. So that is part and parcel of what makes up the company's DNA, those considerations about our impact on the planet and its communities. We often are the data provider kind of standing behind. I think of us as like the intel inside many of the solutions and platforms that folks use every day. Some of my favorites are Global Forest Watch, for example, or the Allen Coral Atlas, that provide information free to the end user about how these important places on our planet are changing, where they're at risk, and what you can do about it. That said, we do have our own programs where we directly interact with researchers, with our customers and users, with our set of partners like ERM. And also, I expect through a new digital public good on biodiversity, monitoring vulnerable biodiversity hotspots at the landscape level, doing it with organizations that have biodiversity expertise, know how to use remotely sensed imagery and data, but also have a long-term say or a stake in the place at hand. Understanding what data are valuable, how they get used and when, and promote real conservation and benefits to communities on the ground is part of what we commit to do and what we think is important around biodiversity and around all of our North Star aligned mission-driven areas.
Glad to hear about the ethics kind of oversight. I think in the business you're in, it would be inevitable that it would be really important to you maintaining public trust. And I guess I wanted to go back, and this is probably the moment to do it, to you mentioned you're publicly traded and public benefit, and people may have a sense of that, but where's the kind of trade-off? Publicly traded, you're a company with a profit motive. Public benefit, Sounds like public benefit. And you mentioned some of your data goes to certain partners for free. Where's the balance for that in how Planet approaches the world and the marketplace?
The first thing I'll say is we're all making it up as we go along. PBCs, public benefit corporations, there are fewer than 24 that
Wow.
exist on the planet. So we're trying to figure out, what does it mean? For us, I can say it's really important, those quarterly reports, how we're doing financially, our fiscal health for our shareholders. We think about that all the time. But at the same time, like a nonprofit would, we are annually reporting on and measuring our impact on those North Star aligned areas. For biodiversity, we're thinking about those places where rare and endemic species are and how we're increasing conservation coverage and attention and monitoring for those places. We do that reporting internally all the way up to our CEO and through our board. So we think about these things both structurally and conceptually. We drive it into our products and our services and partnerships on the commercial side. And then we also do, as you mentioned, these digital public goods, where we work with many partners to put these data, these really important information into the hands of folks without a charge to the end user. An example of this is our partnership with Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, NICFI. The NICFI satellite data program provides these cloud-free mosaics that we call base maps of all tropical forest nations around the world, from like 30 degrees north to 30 degrees south on the planet. These monthly updates on where forest is and how it's changing over time, that is being used by over 26,000 people around the world from something like 150 nations. And so we believe that it's having the kind of impact that we want to have in the world. We do these regular reports to see who's using the data, what are they doing with it? And we know there's a lot of monitoring and enforcement by governments. We know there's establishment of payment for environmental services program to keep more forests standing. And we know there's interdiction and addressing of environmental crimes by civil society and by local actors. And for that reason, we believe we're having an impact on forest biodiversity and avoiding the worst effects of climate change. We aim to do that in all of the areas where we have a PBC purpose commitment.
The longer I listen to both of you, the more I think what we're talking about in the round is whether we collectively, societally, as business, markets, economies, are going to get it right on biodiversity and nature. And we're kind of swimming in a lot of ways in that space in both a societal and a private sector sense right now, I think. And I guess I'm thinking of the arc of the momentum that was created at COP15 in Montreal, where we got a global biodiversity framework. Governments have committed to 30 by 30, which means 30% of land preserved in perpetuity by 2030. We are thinking in the private sector about what nature dependencies are and how to manage them. So how reliant is business on what nature provides to it in order to keep doing what they do? I guess one, and Mike, I'll come to you first. Is this fair? Like if we at ERM have been using this for planning and monitoring, is biodiversity and nature a big part of the future? And how does that intersect with the emerging compliance agenda? Like we have a global biodiversity framework. CSRD has some things to say about biodiversity. Are you juggling all that on your desk as well as everything you've already mentioned?
I think when we think about the framework for the future, absolutely, but even the framework for today, right? This has been a big focus for what we're doing with Planet. How do we use imagery to better inform how we can identify exactly what you're talking about, both the impacts and the dependencies as they relate to nature? And you listed a number of those exact frameworks that we've been thinking about, we've been trying to help our clients address, right? What's the current state of nature around their facilities, around their operations, so that we can better report that to things like TNFD or CSRD and those other relevant frameworks. Another big thing that we're seeing is changing regulation in the EU, one of which is actually EU deforestation regulations. And that's essentially where companies are required to prove that that products that they place on the European market don't result in significant deforestation for certain types of commodities. And we've seen that's actually a really important driver today of helping companies both understand their supply chains, but also be able to showcase kind of minimizing impacts on forests, on these ecosystems. And a core element to that is actually being able to visually show that there has not been deforestation for many of these commodities. And that's where we're working really closely with Planet to put together essentially a due diligence statement for clients so that they can best showcase they have not resulted in deforestation as a result of the products they're putting into the EU market. So I think you're exactly right. This is the direction that we've been moving forward in with Planet, and really thinking holistically about how can we bring together these digital tools that Planet brings, including the imagery, alongside a lot of our advisory services where we help clients set their targets, understand how they meet these goals, how do they actually minimize impacts or evaluate risks to their business.
And feels like not only can that serve a compliance agenda and kind of response to regulators and other authorities, but it could work all the way down to the level of consumer trust and demand for certification and verification and confidence that we as consumers are buying products that we know did not have negative environmental or social impacts. Planet, by by accident or on purpose, seems like a global biodiversity monitoring system. And I think you said something like that in one of the conversations we had previously. So is the next stage that you actively build that out on purpose, or is that just adjunct? And you mentioned Tanager too and its amazing capabilities. Is that part of expanding this ability?
Yeah, Mark, as you alluded to, the challenges we face right now with climate change and biodiversity loss, they're daunting, and some might even call them existential. But as Mike said, we're seeing this regulatory landscape change dramatically and quickly. We're seeing new ways that companies and corporations are being asked to measure and account for their dependencies on nature and the impacts they have on it. At the same time, you made mention of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the most ambitious pact for nature globally that the world has ever seen.
Ever.
So
Yeah.
my career has been in environmental conservation and biodiversity. Maybe you could tell. And I found that we have revolutionary data and technologies now that we have access to. It is opening up the opportunity that in the next 5 years, I have no doubt we will have a near real-time biodiversity monitoring system for the globe. I wanted to be a part of that. And I know that Planet's capabilities, its satellites, the new constellations or flocks that are coming online will play an important, significant, and a growing role. It's with those analyses and the insights that companies and groups like ERM provide that we will actually build this bridge from the knowledge that we have, the potential that's on orbit, to the changing decisions we need to actually reverse climate change and to solve the biodiversity crisis. I'm so grateful that we have this partnership, that we're working on this together. And I know that with the brilliant partners that we count on and the customers who are coming on board, that we will have more of the solution in front of us in a year, in 2 years, to report at these next conference of parties for the UN Conventions on Climate Change and Biodiversity, and back into these new regulatory systems that are demanding we pay attention to our interface with nature.
And you gave us a timeline in there of about 5 years. And it's remarkable to think it's possible that soon. Of course, we know with the way the kind of meta indicators on biodiversity, climate, and otherwise are currently going that we need that kind of data available to us today. So fantastic to hear it's kind of that near. What are each of you excited about as a next step in terms of building and applying this kind of data, really putting it to work, both for the good of the planet and for the good of the people who live and work on it? And Mike, I'll try you first and then give Amy the last word.
We have many businesses that are actually looking for that in today's day and age, where they're saying, help us understand we've got a variety of different assets that we want to monitor. We've got a variety of different projects that we have in place. Help us understand the impacts that we're having on nature, but also help us then report on that. Help us define a strategy for how we change. And I think what we're excited about is that Planet brings a really useful tool in combination with our advisory services to be able to evaluate that in conjunction together and set more holistic strategies that help us maintain a sustainable future for both businesses, but also the society that we're all part of. So really excited, but I'll pass it over to Amy here for her last thoughts.
I'm excited about the Nature Tech Alliance. This is a partnership between ERM, Planet, Nature Metrics, which does environmental DNA to understand biodiversity in the water or on the ground, and Salesforce. This group is going to bring forward so many insights on nature. Our first partners in this sphere are going to help set the tone and the standard for what is it that we can know and can do around nature. How do we set these strategies in smarter, more incisive ways? And how do we ensure that we can do good by doing well?
So glad you raised the Nature Tech Alliance. It was just launched in Davos in January. And we're really incredibly excited on our side about the potential for it to race forward there as well. I want to just close again. Thanks so much to both of you. I think the work you're doing is almost mystical and is so exciting because it turns out to be so applicable at the same time. So fantastic to get to speak with you, Amy, to get to speak with you, Mike, and to learn a little bit more about how our organizations combine to put all the data and knowledge that's extant here to good work. Again, to all of our listeners, if you are interested in picking up past episodes, they're all available on erm.com. You should be able to pick us up on your favorite podcast platform as well. And if you have a chance to give it a rating or give us any comments, we would love to hear from you at any time. Thanks so much, and bye for now.